Breaking news into Rock Feed. A video was just shown by AEW of a very real incident between CM Punk and Jack Perry backstage at AEW's massive all-in stadium show last year in London. This incident led to CM Punk's firing. You had Tony Khan, who is the owner of the company, saying that something also happened with CM Punk where he felt unsafe. That also factored into his consideration to let him go. CM Punk recently gave an interview. This is something that happened last year, but he recently spoke about this. It got a lot of attention. We're going to look at some of the things he said, but this is clearly a response to that. And one of the things that I want to point out is every so often, and it's not very often, something will happen in the pro wrestling world where you go, this is one of those things that's going to be talked about for a very long time. And this is definitely one of those moments. This is not fake. This is not a work. CM Punk is no longer with AEW, and he was let go from the company by this. This is one of those things where you look at when the outsiders left WCW and they end up in WWF at the time. This is one of those shocking moments. Or when DX pulled up in a tank at the WCW show. Now, AEW is a company that launched with a lot of hype, but unfortunately, over the last year or so, some of their hype has been waning with a lot of that star power. People like CM Punk not working out with the company, and they've kind of, while they have a lot of great stars there, a lot of really brilliant talents, the brand, they've had attendance issues and things like that. Well, this is certainly going to get a lot of attention for AEW. There are shades of WCW that I see personally in AEW, particularly as it relates to leadership. And WCW, one of its biggest downfalls was the fact that you had kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. There were a lot of people pulling each other in different directions, and the leadership wasn't effective. And in some ways, when you hear CM Punk talk about what he encountered in AEW, it sounds quite similar. But then when you watch this video, you can see this for yourself, and I'm going to show it to you here in just a moment. I want you to look at this, and I want you to make a determination on who you think is at fault here. It's also important to note you can't hear what's being said. There's no audio to this, and I guess it comes down to what exactly Jack Perry might have said for CM Punk, as you will clearly see, to have reacted in the way he did. Now, CM Punk is not just a pro wrestler. He's a very real mixed martial artist, and I would say that he obviously didn't have a very successful tenure in UFC, but I respect the hell out of him for trying. And even if you're not successful in UFC, you can probably kick 90% of people's asses if you have learned those skill sets. So I want you to take a look at this, and I want to hear what you think down in the comments. And in just a moment, we are going to be joined by a very, very special guest. Stick around for this. He's a big wrestling fan, and you'll be very familiar with him and his band. So first of all, let's take a look at this video. So this video being released is clearly a direct response to what CM Punk had to say on this interview with Ariel Helwani. It was a shoot interview. He was going through everything, and he held nothing back. It said that Tony Khan is furious about the things that he said in this interview, questioning the leadership, all of that. But these are some of the things that he claimed about this from Wrestling Inc. He said, there are always these rumors about NDAs. There's a big difference between being not allowed to talk about some shit or not wanting to talk about some shit. I don't necessarily want to litigate this again. And then he just unloads. He sure as hell did litigate this. And he said, I was told people are getting separated, so there are not problems. You don't want me involved in this. He's going to Tony Khan basically saying, you handle this or I will handle this, because people were doing stuff that he just did not find acceptable and it was causing problems. So he goes, if you don't, I'm going to handle it, and you're not going to like the way I handle it. Again, this is a disagreement where Jack Perry essentially wanted to use real glass for an upcoming segment. CM Punk was not down with that. And then he thought why this was even an argument, why this was even a problem. He wasn't even supposed to be at the show. And he's saying there are people that are trying to film content, so they only have to come in every few weeks. These are things that I remember, like people saying about the downfall of WCW. I mean, just do with that of what you will. So he goes, you don't want me involved in this, just like everything I've explained before. Y'all need to handle this. If you don't, I'm going to handle it. You're not going to like the way I handle it. He's begging me, drags me out of catering. I walked up to Jack. He's sitting in the car. What he wanted to do was smash out the window of a rental car with a pipe. I was like, it's a rental car. I very politely, because I like Jack. Doc has told you no. Daryl has told you no. Mike has told you no. Shivani has told you no. Now I have to tell you no. Apparently you've cussed them all out. I'm telling you no. We don't do that here. You don't want this. Go to Wednesday and do this if you want to do this, is what he said. Continuing, to come to this new show with everyone is supposed to be separated to get rid of all the drama, swearing at the doctor. The doctor's like, it's real glass. Shit's going to go in your eye. I get it. I used to be that kid that was young and wanted to do this. There's a safe way to do this. I politely explained to him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cuss at him. I was just like, we don't do that here. This is Saturday. You want to do stuff like this, do it on Wednesday. That was it. I didn't think it was going to be a problem. He took something very business-minded, very personally. That's fine. I've done that before too. It's very much who he is friends with, and shit never got squashed. Nobody is in charge. It turned what it turned into. So Punk continues. He ends up taking matters into his own hands, and he says that Jack came back from his match. I'm the next match. I'm sitting there. I got people with me. I walk up to him and I'm like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit on TV? He's like, if you have a problem, do something about it. I was like, come on, man. I can effing kill you. What are we doing? I thought I was doing the responsible thing. I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop. I quit. I turned to Tony and said, this place is an effing joke. You're a clown. I quit. I went to my room. Joe and Jerry Lynn came and got me and were like, let's go out there and kill it. I was too fired up. I'm fired up now. I'm probably going to regret talking about all this shit, but that's what happened. So he's pretty transparent about what happened. And now they've gone on AEW and shown the following video. And we're going to watch this with a very special guest. You know him and you know his band. Johnny Christ, bassist of Avenged Sevenfold, just wrapped up that third leg of the Life is But a Dream tour. You can also check out his podcast, Drinks with Johnny. Highly recommend that as well. Link to it in the description. We're going to watch this video together. Thank you, Johnny, so much for joining us.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into it and take a look at this video, which is crazy. As I said a moment ago, this is one of those things that I think we're going to look back on and go, this was a huge moment in pro wrestling. Shit's going down tonight. So here we go. So there's no sound to this, but what you're seeing is they have some sort of security camera feed. They showed this on AEW, and this is what CM Punk alluded to and spoke about in great detail on that interview with Ariel Helwani, which broke the internet. Right. And so here it is, folks. You make your reactions. Let's watch this in real time. All right, so he's just standing there. Punk's walking up. Samoa's in the background. Yeah. He's getting in his face.
It's not too far in his face yet, though.
Yeah, not really.
Looks like a little chat first.
Yeah, a little chat. Now, that producer to the right senses something's up. Perry seems calm.
His hands are still in his pocket, though. His hands are still in his pocket. Oh, now they come out.
Yeah, now we're looking around. There's like a dude behind, like, y'all seen this shit, bro?
Yeah.
Okay, he's putting his hair behind. Oh, man. Oh, the ref's sitting. Oh, Samoa's jumping in. Oh, he's on the radio. He's like, get somebody back here. Damn.
Okay.
Damn. And that's real shit. That's what led to CM Punk's dismissal. You've got... Whoa, and now, so he's, let me just
Malachi.
Look at the
There's
dude.
Malachi Black right there.
The guy in the pink shirt. That dude, like,
I didn't see.
All right, so this dude in the pink, does anybody know this guy's? Because watch his reaction. He's like,
I think that's Charlie.
Okay, so Charlie.
No, that's not Charlie. I'm sorry. So it's so hard to see in this security camera. I apologize.
He's like, oh, look at it. He knows this is bad.
That's definitely not Charlie. That's definitely not Charlie.
Johnny, what are your thoughts, man?
Man, we've been hearing about this infamous video for a long time as wrestling fans, and you never know what's going on really behind the scenes and everything like that. And the only people that know are those that were in that video, right? And man, when I see it, it starts out. I mean, I have to say, it starts out very much like Punk laid out with Ariel last week on that podcast that you mentioned. Looks like he was pretty calm when he approached him and talked about, as he said in the podcast, I believe he was saying he just came up and was like, this is, hey man, we can't do this. He gave his story. I mean, obviously with the audio, it's still hard to say how aggressive, how non-aggressive, what was actually said. But I mean, CM Punk was in MMA for a minute. So, I mean, I imagine he was going to be the one to throw the first punch, I guess. I saw something that you sent me, like a real quick clip of it off Twitter a second ago, and that one I just I saw that he handled him, and I was like, well, I mean, Punk's bigger, he's got an MMA background, you know. I mean, I kind of expected it to have gone down that way, but I mean, I wish we had the audio, to be honest, because like I said, it looks like what Punk said was in the podcast was kind of true. But I mean, you still can't put your hands on somebody else. I mean, at the end of the day,
He says in the Ariel Hawani interview, he says that he basically, Perry looks at him and goes like, what do you, or if you have a problem with it. So Perry's basically talking shit about CM Punk in the ring. Punk is like, can you stop this internet shit? Can you just knock this off? Why do you got to do this? What are you doing? And then Perry, according to CM Punk, says something to the effect of, you know, if you got a problem with it, why don't you do something about it? And then something, I will say this, when you look at Punk's reaction, something almost instinctively set him off. It went from a kind of a tense discussion, maybe an aggravated discussion, but still in the professional sense. You know, he's just criticizing him as a person who I think has proven himself in the industry and has that respect where he can say, like, come on, man, you know, kind of a respect your elder, respect your veterans. But yeah, I mean, he put his hands on the guy. To Punk's credit, he had acknowledged that he did that. But for me, it's kind of a situation where I said this earlier. When I look at AEW right now, I think it's still a great promotion, but some of the buzz has kind of gone down a little bit. And that's really through no fault of their own. They were depending big on Punk to be there. He left. That kind of took some of the wind out of their sails. But it does seem like a lot of what Punk alluded to in the interview reminds me in some ways of WCW, where there were kind of leadership issues. And what I mean by that is there was no one who was like a Triple H or, you know, Vince style person. Vince no longer at WWE, but like there was not that one guy that was like, knock it the fuck off. And so
I honestly have some mixed opinions about that. I know the history and stuff. I've had Eric Bischoff on my show a few years back, and I listened to his podcast, 83 Weeks, and how he recalls.
It's a great podcast.
Something. It is a fantastic. Conrad Thompson killing it.
Absolutely.
You know, ever since. Absolutely.
Much respect.
Brilliant in the wrestling podcasting world. And, yeah, it's pretty insightful. You know, they're trying to remember things from 20 plus years ago. So there's some cracks in some of the stories, obviously, but they're very forthcoming with that. And, you know, I push back on the lack of leadership role a little bit. I mean, you know, I think that was a little blown out of proportion. I mean, you have a locker room of, you know, close to 100 people, you know, there's going to be some butting of heads that happen naturally.
Sure.
Like to this point with Punk and Perry, like, you know, that's they're probably going to have that heated discussion. Now, the fact that it comes to hands on a man and comes to fisticuffs doesn't always happen. But I got to imagine this kind of headbutting happens all the time, right? I don't really see it as that. I know that a lot of people make that comparison to WCW. I don't necessarily see that yet or anything like that from everything that I've seen. I will say I push back on the it goes down every time because we're looking at something that is a timing issue, right? I mean, WWE is taking the bull by the horns right now, you know, with The Rock, and you know, it's Mania season. You know, you're gonna have a dip. Everyone's gonna tune in a little bit more to WWE. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that gets put into, you know, this downtime for you know, viewership or eyes on,
Sure.
and as you said it for AEW, that's happened over the last few years. I mean, they're a brand new company. WCW had at least been around for a while. They weren't a very, you know, successful company before 1995, 1996, maybe even 94 when Hogan first got there is when they first started to get a little bit of some business acumen, but they had been a company for a long time before that. This is brand new since 2019.
Yes.
So I mean, you got to take some of that with a grain of salt, I think. But yeah, I mean, this is wild. I just heard that they played this on AEW Dynamite. I got my other screen up here, as I said before. I'm watching it right now, watching it back because I just got back from my son's basketball practice. I record all wrestling, AEW, WWE, every week, and I go back and watch it. And yeah, as I said, I do think the downturn and the eyes on AEW typically happen from January to March. Seems to be the case. They did have a little bit of an uptick with Sting's last match
Yeah.
at the beginning of March. I think that was strategic, obviously. Also, I just think it was, knowing Sting a little bit, he had been planning that for a long time. So,
And y'all were
but I
involved
mean,
in that Avenged, I believe Avenged music. I think Matt was telling me that they used some of y'all's music in that.
yeah. So, I'm actually good friends with Darby Allin, who was Sting's partner
Wow.
the whole time, and they used for a pay per view before that. They used why am I drawing a blank on this song? The first song off Live Ad. Why am I drawing a blank on my own fucking song?
Hey, it happens.
Yeah. But this one was the actual title track, Life is But a Dream, the piano orchestra, or not orchestra, the piano piece that Sinister Gates played at the end of the record. And they put together the montage. And I knew that was coming. Darby had sent me a rough draft of it before and said that he wanted to use the song. So I'd seen a little bit of it before, but of course I went out to Greensboro for this match, and getting to see the full promo in its entirety, the end of it, with it playing in front of 20,000 fans, and being the huge wrestling and huge Sting fan that I am.
Dang,
It was a
man.
really, really cool moment. So yeah, I mean, anytime, I'm always for our music being used for wrestling, because as I said, I'm a huge fan, man. I have been, I mean, since birth, really. I was at the second WrestleMania, the LA part of it, 3 months old on my mother's teat, as it
Wow.
goes.
Dude, that's
Yeah,
amazing. So,
yeah,
so I think with AEW, and I agree with your point that it's kind of comparing apples to oranges a bit, and it's different. But what I see here from tonight, that took guts. That was compelling for them to have aired that. This is something that will clearly be talked about for a very long time. What went down
yeah,
tonight on AEW. I think there's going to be tremendous fallout. And there's a lot of reports out there that Tony Khan was pissed about that CM Punk interview. And so, and I do think a lot of Tony Khan. I think he's done a lot for the wrestling business, and you can tell that he really does care. And so it's going to be real interesting to see going forward what I think Punk's going to respond to this.
oh
And
yeah, absolutely. I think WWE will. I think, especially the way that they've been running WWE, getting ready for that Raw move to Netflix. I mean, you could see the writing on the wall in Raw if you've been paying attention.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, they're without Vince there, it seems to me that they're letting the wrestlers kind of take the mic in the direction that they want to. So that Punk, the next time he's standing in the ring, the next chance he gets, he's going to address it, which is amazing. I mean, and to the point of Tony Khan being upset about the interview. Yeah, I mean, he took some shots at him. I mean, I'm friendly with Tony as well. I've never met CM Punk, but I'm friends with Lars Fredrickson, one of his close friends, and I'm a big fan of CM Punk. It just sounds like two
absolutely.
guys who obviously butted heads on stuff and don't see eye to eye with the industry. And you could, everyone's going to pick their sides, I guess. But for me, it's like I could see it. I mean, I could see why Tony would be upset about the interview, but that's, you can't do anything about that. He's not on the roster. He's got his own opinions and perspective of what happened, and Tony's got his. And that's just, I
I'll
mean, that's just how it goes.
I'll tell you what. Under this new ownership, one of the stories that I read about this week was that in Endeavor or TKO, the parent company now of WWE, which I'm a huge UFC fan as well, and I know this is a really smart company, and I know that they have a different ability to make things happen, and I think we're starting to see that very clearly. And what's interesting to me is that there's been some discussion about them potentially even working with their own competition. And I would wonder if you're Endeavor, you're Ari Emanuel, you're The Rock, you're Triple H. if you're having a conversation right now where you're going, there's a chance for us to potentially put something together that may be one of the biggest moments in wrestling history based on the heat that's been drawn up here.
Are you suggesting that they would do something together, WWE and AEW? Is that what you're alluding to there?
I think, I know it's probably not likely, but I think that if it were to occur, it could be potentially mutually beneficial. And in the past, the UFC has teamed up with rival promotions repeatedly. And so I
Right.
think they're definitely not threatened. If you're Endeavor, if you're TKO, AEW rules. I love AEW, but they're not threatened by them. You know what I mean?
No,
They're not threatened
no.
by them. It's a different thing. And I love AEW. But so I mean, if I were them, I'd be getting on the phone with maybe Punk and go, "Do you want to fuck this guy up?" You know? And I'd get on the phone with Jack and go, "Do you want to fuck this guy up? Well, let's
Man,
get in
I
the
don't know.
cage." Because I
That
mean,
would be
now they can bring
wild,
the.
man.
I
Everyone
mean,
would tune in. Every wrestling. I mean, that everybody would tune in. I
it's
was
the
about to say
company
every
that brought
wrestling
you
fan, but
Power Slap.
people would. Yeah, yeah. That's very true, man. I don't know. I don't know if I see it. I was always hoping for that. I mean, usually, I was probably 11 years old, 12 years old when Razor Ramon showed up as Scott Hall in WCW, and it was so never been done before that I believed the hell out of it. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna meld these two. I was a fan of WCW, watched both, regularly, WCW and WWF at the time, and and then when Diesel showed up, Kevin Nash, and then of course, later on, Outsiders are going crazy every week on Nitro. It was some of the funnest wrestling ever. Then, the Monday Night Wars happened. Triple H and DX shows up at the door of the arena because they're down the street. I mean, so many rad things that
That was 5 minutes for me where that happened.
Was it really? That was in
Yep.
Virginia. Yeah. I forgot where it was. Yeah, that was insane. They roll up with the tank. I mean, and that was at a time when, you didn't have DVR and everything. So I'm literally going back and forth between USA and TNT on commercial breaks and seeing like what's going on, And man, that was, to your point, I was always hopeful. I'm like, man, what if we're going to get the pay-per-view WWF versus WCW? And it was, and you got a little bit of the takeover pay-per-view that happened in the early 2000s after WWE bought the rights to WCW. But it wasn't the same. It was kind of like in boxing where they end up you get your big card, but it's a little bit past their prime sometimes, And but to your point, UFC and Endeavor have always been good about giving the fans the cards at the time of the fighters' popularity, and you're right, it's not the same. AEW and WWE, they're not in direct competition. I mean, WWE, if you're looking at it monetarily alone, they're not threatened whatsoever. No. But
and that's no disrespect.
I love it. It is none
Right.
whatsoever. When I had Tony on the show years ago, even Tony Khan, he was very honest. He was like, we're not in competition. There's enough room for two different styles of wrestling, and they prove it. It's completely two different styles. If you want the storylines, you want the big production, you're a WWE fan, and that's beautiful. I'm a huge WWE fan. If you want some of the more raw, some of the more indie feeling, or the New Japan feeling of wrestling, you're gonna side with AEW, and that's okay.
For me, I have so much faith in this TKO Endeavor, all of that, to get The Rock back and to get The Rock for real back and what he's been doing. So, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I got real cynical on wrestling over the last couple of years, or really actually specifically WWE, not AEW. I was real cynical on it became very stale. It just, as much as I wanted to be interesting, it was hard. And that's not it. This is just simply an issue with creative. And to prove that point, now they're getting edgier. Can't you feel that like they're really ramping up what I have wanted since I was a kid for them to do? And The Rock is being a part of this. And it's like, okay, guys, if you're watching at home and you haven't watched WWE for a time, I have felt like you. I watched WrestleMania weekend And in the past, I would almost like obligatory watch. I wanted to support, and I'd be like, I love it's just America's. It's like baseball to me. I'm like, it's just a pastime. I couldn't turn away at WrestleMania this past
It was
weekend.
amazing. It was an amazing thing. I've gotten back into wrestling. My son kind of helped me get back into it. Right around the time he was like 2.5, 3. I was getting real tired of watching the cartoons, and I was like, well, let's see if he likes wrestling,
Hell yeah.
And we started watching stuff, and then being friends with Chris Jericho, I was checking out what was going on with AEW,
Yes, legend.
and of course WWE, going back and forth and seeing the two things. And I agree with you. I think most wrestling fans would agree that the creative was getting a bit stale for a while. But I will say, like 2 years ago, WrestleMania, when Stone Cold and Pat McAfee and Vince, took a stunner again at the age of 80, whatever the hell he is. And like that was starting to already feel like that again to me.
Right.
And then to your point now, I mean, you got The Rock and Triple H, and Triple H really running things, and The Rock
For
in a
real this
very
time.
big role. Yeah, for real this time. And again, to point out that Netflix thing, I mean, for a lot of years, you look at it as a business too. And what Vince and the team was thinking before was, we don't want to alienate sponsorships and ad revenue, and we want it to be a family friendly thing. And that's what they went for. Without real competition, they didn't need to go after anything else. They had their niche. And again, it's not like it's direct competition, but AEW, I think, definitely a little bit of a fire because they were a little bit more raw. No pun intended there.
Hey,
And yeah, I think that they saw that, and I think a lot of people probably in that industry wanted to do it too. It was the powers of the board and Vince at the time. From what I understand, I'm not in the locker rooms, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, it seemed to me like there was a bit of of people wanting to go that direction for a while now, but it just wasn't the time. And now again, when you think about it business wise, and the fact that they're putting sponsorships on the ring like Endeavor and TK have done with UFC, that's where their sponsorships are going to lie. So, and Netflix is a contractual deal, so you're not running commercials, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about censorship really.
Oh yeah.
Unless you want to, it's up to your own discretion at that point. And I think it's great because I don't know what they're going to do with SmackDown and Peacock because they still have those deals there with Fox and NBC. That'll be interesting to see too. Maybe that'll be the alternative where they still continue to make it more family programming there. And if you want to see more of the Raw, going to the name that time, the pun was intended.
Yeah.
You're going to go to Netflix, and I think that's awesome. And everything that The Rock did. I mean, The Rock can do no wrong, in my opinion. He
Correct.
is, as a comedian, a friend of mine, Ron Funches, said to me one time, he is the Beyonce of for men. And I totally
it's a great
agree.
analogy.
It really is. And I when you said that, I was like, you're absolutely right. I mean,
it's a great
everything
point
that he's done. And his promos that were running up until WrestleMania, the ones that were going on straight to Twitter, the brilliant use of social media that WWE has displayed over the last few months is just something. I mean, that's who WWE is. Like, when it comes down to it, no one's better than them at producing a great storyline and utilizing the tools at everyone's expense, or not expense, but at everyone's disposal. Yeah, I just think they've proven it for over 40 years now, going back to when Vince was the first one and said, I'm going to put it on cable TV, and everyone thought he was crazy.
Yeah, and he changed the game, and now WWE, it feels like they're gaining new wind. This is for sure going to be something that's going to be talked about. I feel the energy around this situation probably that I haven't felt since another CM Punk situation, the pipe bomb, and this is even more real than that. And so this is very compelling, and I think we're all going to we know CM Punk is going to respond, and we know when he does, it's going to be batshit. And I would also think that he's probably got a lot of people in WWE. It's actually crazy to say this. If I said this 5 years ago, I would sound insane, but he's probably got a lot of people that have his back in WWE right now. And so I think this is probably going to create another one of those DX versus WCW, bring the tank over type situation. Even if they don't directly confront, I would say for sure there's going to be some beef going back and forth. And if I'm and not just TKO, I also think Tony Khan's the type of guy that would also be down with this at the end of the day. Very smart businessman. If I'm Tony Khan, if I would get on the phone with anybody I have a rapport with at WWE, and I'm sure there are people, and I'd go tell those motherfuckers we're ready to play this up, and this is spectacular.
For the fans, man. Yeah, for the fans. I mean, I hope you're right. I don't necessarily see it, but I hope you're right. I just think it's anything that's bringing the attention to wrestling right now. Again, to your point, I mean, a lot of people, I feel like wrestling fans would just kind of be, bystanders. You watch the clips on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, and you don't really tune into the full show every not everyone's got time for that, and if they're not invested in the product, they're not being, the believability is not being brought into the product. I think that was, getting people like yourself and me who have been fans for a long time. It was getting a little stale because of that. And, this just brings that feeling back, that believability, whatever's going on. And that's the greatest thing is we don't really know what's going on. Even when they release the security camera, when they release that, there's that element of like, what the fuck still? It's not like, oh, now we know we can move on. It's like, oh, okay, there's some more shit coming, to your point. And that's like, it's so much fun. I mean, like I said, I'm a fan of both organizations. I have friends in both companies, and it excites me as I feel like a 12-year-old kid again. I'm just like so excited for all this. Johnny, and this, by the way, at the top, it was game over. So everyone doesn't fry me here on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, and also we all have brain farts. So if you're mad about that, get a fucking life, guys.
I mean, there's a long catalog. I've been doing it for over 20 years.
It's like, get over yourself if you're upset about that. Come on now, Johnny.
I hope they are, and I hope they do roast me for it.
That's right. But Johnny, this has been amazing. This is way more in depth than I thought it would be. You are obviously a student of wrestling. Drinks with Johnny. Check out his podcast. Something tells me we'll be having you back a lot more, and I'm happy to come on yours as well. Check that out. And
can't wait for that.
If you're looking for some new music to check out his band too, Avenged Sevenfold. This is up and coming band, and doing very well.
I love that.
And I'm still mad they kicked me out of their show recently, but I'm a forgiving person.
Yeah, that's why we had to do this virtually, because I'm
not even allowed to be around you guys within 100 feet.
We're still working on that restraining order at this point.
So messed up, man. I'm pissed about that, but it's okay. I'm forgiving. But Johnny, thank you so much, brother. And everybody, if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for the latest news and updates.